to all the viewers. So today we are in conversation with the author of the book Brand Magic himself, a person who's been associated with multiple brands since its nascent stage. We are delighted to have you, sir, with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so to start off, we would like to understand, can you just walk us through your experience of developing this book called Brand Magic?
The book, any book for that matter, develops with an idea. And an idea keeps germinating in your head for some time. Now, most people who write books in the domain that they have some knowledge of or they have some expertise of. My entire life has been spent in marketing, branding, advertising, marketing communications. So it was a logical sequence, and since I'm fond of writing, I've been writing since my college days. And I thought that there must be a book that encapsulates my experiences. So after having moved from industry and then moved into academics almost on a full-time basis, I said that this is an excellent opportunity for me to integrate my learnings in industry with what the learnings I have from textbooks. And that is really the genesis of my book. And as I mentioned earlier, my students were really the accelerator for this book. When I used to teach in class, they used to say, "Sir, your case studies are excellent and they add a lot of value to what you're teaching. So why don't you put it down in the form of a book?" And that's really the genesis of why Brand Magic came about. Secondly, all these brands that I have written in the book are brands that I have personally worked with, most of these brands. And therefore, there is an inner conviction when you write anything of what you're writing about. So it's something based on experience, and having had a lot of experience in industry and a fair amount of experience in academics, I thought the amalgamation of these two concepts would be extremely interesting to bring in the form of a book, and that's how Brand Magic came about.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir.
So your book Brand Magic, it talks about various brands such as Amul, Fog, and what is one common thread that binds all of these brands that have created a lasting magic?
I think there are a couple of things actually, but the key insight that I can take out from all these brands is that each brand weaves its own story. Each brand has what I call a core value, which encapsulates the heart and the soul of the brand. Now, when you're bringing a brand into a marketplace, you have to understand what your brand stands for and what the consumer wants. And when the integration of these two happen through effective marketing communications, a successful brand is born. So if you take a look at all these brands, the common things that run through these entire stories is one, that these brands recognize the need of the consumer as far as that particular product is concerned. There is a felt need. The second important thing is that the brand is able to craft its unique selling proposition or its positioning in such a way that it becomes endearing to the brand. So therefore, all these brands, if you see, have some kind of a tagline which encapsulates the brand, and I think that is the fundamental point that comes about. For example, the Taste of India for Amul is a tagline that encapsulates the brand's value. Similarly, all the other brands have their own stories, have their own taglines, and this is one common thread. So if that connect with the consumer is created through a very endearing piece of effective marketing communications, I think your perception is clear as far as that brand is concerned.
Absolutely, sir.
Absolutely, sir. Just following up to that, I wanted to ask, from the story of what I found the most insightful was the importance of the consumer research, how you identify the gaps in the market and
That's
you
right.
bring in a product offering to fill that gap.
That's right.
So what I want to understand, these legacy companies, they have been following that, but the today's startups, do you believe that they are actually following this ideology?
I think to understand the consumer is a mindset issue. And I think you cannot escape, whether you're a legacy brand or whether you're a current brand, you cannot escape the fact that you have to understand the consumer. Now in the traditional mode, what we used to do is we used to conduct consumer research, large-scale research, spend a lot of money. In fact, the fog example that you've taken, Darshan Bhai Patel has a great amount of faith in consumer research. He spends a lot of money in that. He is able to derive insights not by himself, but by interacting with consumer professionals and marketing professionals. And he's able to derive insights which will ultimately tick with the consumer. So this entire fog story was a result of a consumer insight. But more importantly than that, how that insight is communicated to the consumer through endearing marketing communications is the final leg of the game. So it's not just getting the insight, but it's a question of communicating it. In today's context, I think understanding consumers has become easier, because what happens is when you're getting into a digital space, and I mentioned this, analytics is giving you all the data that you need. I mean, you don't need to add more money to the research. You just track the consumer, and you have got algorithms, artificial intelligence, which will actually do the work for you. You don't have to sit down. Traditionally, we used to do it with Excel sheets, use SPSS and all the tools and techniques. You don't need to do that anymore. You need to just take a look at where your consumer is moving, and you've got sufficient number of consumers whom you can track and find out what their behavior is. So consumer behavior, actually understanding that, I think is becoming much easier. But the bottom line is, you cannot afford to neglect the consumer. You cannot say that I will, create this. It is possible sometimes that the consumer doesn't know what he wants, in which case then you create new products. For example, who knew that the cell phone would be something that the consumer would need? But over a period of time, we went from our plain old telephones bought to what are cell phones today. So there is a transition. So many times consumers are not aware of products, but get to know the products by the sheer introduction of that product and the communication of that product. Similarly, all the aggregate models, for example, Uber is a classic case in point. People felt that there was a need for, the people who started Uber felt that there was a need for using technology to provide a service. And what is interesting today is that companies just provide platforms. They have no assets. Uber doesn't own any taxis, but Uber aggregates taxis and creates a model, both back end and in the front end, to provide a service. And it's an excellent model which has created millions of dollars for the company. So I think you have to understand the consumer. You have to understand consumer needs. And today, I think a lot of tech products are coming out because of consumer needs.
So I think for understanding consumer needs, communication is the key. And to deliver that, when we talk about advertisement specifically, so it is more around emotional needs of the customer. So how relevant is combining it with the storyline and to retain the customers, and how important it is to keep a balance between it?
See, I think when you talk about advertising and marketing communications, I agree with you that the storyline is extremely important. But you must remember that merely emotions will not sell a physical product. So for example, if you're talking about, shall we say, a lipstick, okay, which a woman buys, the lipstick per se must be good in terms of quality, in terms of range of colors, in terms of applicability, in terms of image, in terms of emotions. So it's a basket of things that are important. So it's a combination of the physical attributes as well as the emotional attributes that finally round off the product or the brand.
Right.
Sir, the book quotes that initial failure should not dampen your courage, as hurdles are bound to come. What is your opinion on this? And do you feel today's startup actually follow this mindset, as only 5% of them are successful?
See, if you were to take a look at startups today, the startups today are primarily, from whatever little I understand, are bogged down by financial considerations. To build a brand, you require a huge amount of money. Today, the entire game plan has changed. If you take a look at all the case histories, these brands have grown slowly over the period of time, generated their own resources, and people have put money back into it to make it even bigger. So it has had a kind of a snowballing effect. So brands from small have grown big. Today, I think today's startups are impatient. They want to create huge brands, rake in the money immediately. In fact, I suspect that today's startup game is more a valuation game. It's not so much a brand building game. That's my personal opinion. So that's why you have, startups saying that, okay, I've got this idea, I've got this technology, I've got this platform. Now, where's the money going to come from? So you go to a venture capitalist, or you go to someone willing to fund it, and you build your brand. Now, sometimes your brand succeeds pretty fast. Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of these brands go out of the market because you just don't have the financial strength to sustain it, and the entrepreneurs or the people who start these startups don't have the patience to see these brands through. So, as I mentioned, brand building is a long, painstaking process. You have to have patience, and you can lose patience. I think it's also a generation thing. I don't know, but I think my generation, our generation, was far more patient than your generation.
Definitely.
You guys want things fast. Y'all are the transient generation. For example, even when you look at product, y'all are looking. The three of us will probably wear products for years together. Whereas you'll take a shirt, do this, throw it out. Disposable generation. I've still got shirts which I don't know how many years old, and I still continue to wear them. So I think it's a very different generational thing, and it's going to get better or worse depending on how you look at it. With Generation Z and the youngers, those who are in their teens, 13, 14, 15 years old, it's fascinating to see how things are changing today.
Definitely, sir. Like I also had this in mind. Today's startups are more focusing on becoming a unicorn.
That's
but
right.
that is like more based on the funding. But rather than having a sustainable business model growth
Correct.
model.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
So one thing more like I could find that like every business has a vision to grow, and for that a brand like Have More got ready to sell their business to the giant to expand. But how do actually businesses manage to retain their core values, the vision, when the founders have actually changed?
It changes. Very clearly it changes. Once the owner changes hands, it goes to a different company. The culture of Lotte is very different from the culture of Have More.
Yes.
So obviously, although I know the Chonas particularly, they may say that, look, we want the new company to retain the cultural values. It's bound to change. And it's going to happen. So I don't think that you can keep, even if the brand continued to remain with the Chonas and they had not sold it, I'm sure they would have to change in time to come if they had to grow and if they had to retain their market position. So I don't know what really were the considerations for selling, but I guess they just realized that they had to diversify their business, go into something else, and they're running now a chain of restaurants under the brand name of Hoko, which is doing very well. So they've taken that money and gone into some other business and so on and so forth. So different entrepreneurs look at their businesses from different perspectives. Like Balaji, for example, was also offered a huge amount of money by Lay's, but they didn't sell off because they said that, look, no, we want to retain our brand. This is our baby, we have grown it. So different entrepreneurs have different mindsets.
Definitely, sir, this book has a lot of impact on all of us. I gave it a read and it was altogether a wonderful experience. And I must say that it has those key insights, so it is really well structured. And the best part is that it is pictographically stunning.
Yes, sir.
So it makes the experience all the more beautiful when we read it.
There are also links if you are keen on seeing the videos. Go to YouTube. Those links are all YouTube links, and you can get to see. So you can add value to, for example, we couldn't show commercials here, but if you take the Amul case study, take a look at all the Amul commercials. Take a look at, for example, the Manthan corporate film, which is a fascinating film, which encapsulates the entire value proposition of Amul and the whole milk revolution that Dr. Kurian had started.
I'm sure, sir, it will add a lot of value to all the budding marketers. So my final question to you is, like, what message do you want to convey to the youth, to the budding marketers, and also to other students who are from other domains? Like, how can this book create its magic in other domains, for operations, for finance? How can it help them?
See, one thing that I've realized in the 40 plus odd years of my career is, for any business, marketing and branding is key. Now in management, we teach finance, we teach operations, we teach OB, HR, and we teach marketing. Now I believe that if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. So everything else is you have no money to count, so no finance. You have no people to manage, so no OB and HR. You have no operations to do. So everything finally boils down to creating a brand, a market, and delivering customers. So everybody needs to understand marketing, not just marketing people. So that is why you will see over a period of time, marketing people normally become heads of organizations because they drive the organizations through a marketing mindset. And that is, I think, is extremely important. So my humble advice to students of tomorrow, whatever the genre of your specialization, please remember, ultimately for any business, your customer is king. Mahatma Gandhi realized this long back. I think he was the greatest marketing man that India has ever produced. Because what did he do? Through his initiatives, he didn't have media, but through his personal initiatives and his message, he mobilized the millions of people in this country with a vision of getting freedom. Wasn't that marketing? That is marketing.
Right.
So anything that you do involves marketing.
Absolutely. So since all the functions are integrated, so I would suggest all of you to definitely give it a read, and it will definitely transform you and add a lot of value in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank
sir.
you so much.
It was a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We would,
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
sir.
we would now want to get a signed
Thank you so
copy
much, sir.
from you, sir.
Yeah, sure.